Okay, today we're going to be doing 9.6. I need you to take these notes in your journal, or if you don't have your journal, just write them down on paper. This will be your homework for tonight, Tuesday, and we're doing a flipped classroom. Tomorrow you'll come in and we'll work on the actual homework problems in class. So if you look up here, it says inverse tangent, inverse sine, and inverse cosine. I talked about these a few days ago, if not last week, about using the inverse on your calculator to find the actual angle of a triangle. So that's what this lesson is really about. Before, we've been finding the length of all the different sides. Now what you're going to be doing is using the inverse key on your calculator to solve this. So I'll explain that here in a minute. All right, so let's go to this the next slide here. And look at extra practice number 1. The cosine of the angle is 24/25. Okay, so it says determine which of the two angles has the given trigonometric ratio. So which angle? It's either G or F. Remember, we are not ever using the 90-degree angle mark. So it says the cosine of the angle is 24/25. If you remember, cosine in SOHCAHTOA is the adjacent leg over the hypotenuse. So the adjacent leg over the hypotenuse. So if we're going from G, the adjacent leg would be 7, not 24. Okay, so it must be from F, and if we look at F, the adjacent leg is 24 and the hypotenuse is 25. So that answer is angle F. That's the angle they're wanting to know that you used. Okay? So now let's look at number 2, the sine function. Sine is opposite over hypotenuse. So if we look at this, 0.38 is a decimal. So we're going to have to figure out which one of these angles, either E or F, using the sine function, will give us 0.38 on your calculator. So you're going to need to use a calculator. If we go from E, the sine function again is the opposite leg over the hypotenuse. All right, so of E, the opposite leg would be the square root of 2, and the hypotenuse is square root of 14. So take your calculator and calculate what the square root of 2 is divided by the square root of 14. And that will give us 0.38, okay? And since we know it's 0.38 already, we don't need to check F, but I'll just show you what it is. Angle F, the sine function would be 2 square root of 3 over the square root of 14, the hypotenuse. And that is 0.7559. So we know that F is not used at that point. So you have to choose an angle and just do the trig function that it's talking about and see if you get the answer they have. All right, let's move on from here. Let's move up a little bit. Give a little room here. Angle H is an acute angle. Use a calculator to approximate the measure of angle H to the nearest tenth of a degree. All right, so how we do this, so it says the sine of H is equal to 0.2. I need to get H by itself, so I need to move the sine function over. So this is an algebra type of thing. And now we're not dividing by the sine here. We're separating sine from H. And how we do that, angle H is equal to this little thing called arc sine or inverse sine. That's what that -1 means. And it's on your calculator. And how you do that is you hit the second key and then you hit the sine key. That's how you get the inverse sine. And then you plug 0.2 in. So let's do that. We get second sine and put 0.2 in. And that's going to be equal to 11.5. It says round to the nearest tenth, so it's 11.53. That rounds to 11.5. That's your degree. That's the angle you get if you move the sine to the other side. And that gives you your angle. All right, so let's do number 4. So number 4, you're going to do the arc tangent. So angle H here is equal to the arc tangent of 1. So second tangent 1, that equals 45 degrees. Number 5, angle H is going to be the arc cosine of 0.3, oops, not equals, the arc cosine of 0.33. So second cosine 0.33, and that is 70.7 degrees. And then number 6, again, I'm going to give you a moment, or you can pause the recording and do it yourself. I'll just go ahead and move on. If you need to, pause it and see if you can get the right answer. So angle H is equal to the arc sine of 0.89. Figure out what that is. Second sine 0.89. And that would be 62.9 degrees. And that is that page. All right, so that's how you change numbers into degrees. All right, let's go to the next page. Now we're going to do solving a triangle, which means it wants to know all the answers that you can give me. Okay, so if I look at this triangle here, I can figure out what the hypotenuse is by using the Pythagorean Theorem. So I could do 6 squared plus 12 squared is equal to the hypotenuse squared. All right, 36 plus 144 is equal to h squared. 36 plus 144 is 180. And it says round everything to decimals, the nearest tenth. So we can go ahead and take the square root of 180. And that's 13.42. It says to the tenths, so 13.4 is our hypotenuse. So we took the square root to get that. All right, so those are the legs. Let's find the angles. So at angle A, we can use any of the trig functions. If I use the sine function, that's the opposite leg over the hypotenuse. And that'll give me an answer. I don't like using the answers in the problem that I found. I want to use the answers that they give. So I'm going to try to use 12 and 6. So I'm going to use the opposite leg and the adjacent leg. That's the tangent key. So the tangent of angle A is equal to 12 over 6. Or the tangent of angle A is equal to 2. And now we have the same thing as what we did on the other side of the other page. So to get tangent on the other side, angle A is equal to the arc tangent of 2. So hit second tangent and the number 2, and that gives you 63.4 degrees. That would be angle A. All right, now angle C would be really easy because angle B is 90. You can add those together, subtract them from 180. So 180 minus 90 is 90 minus the 63.4. And that gives us 26.6. 26.6 degrees for angle C. And that's how you do it. All right, let's try number 8. Again, I'm going to go ahead and use the Pythagorean Theorem. But they gave us the hypotenuse this time. Remember, the Pythagorean Theorem is a squared plus b squared equals c squared, which is your hypotenuse. So it doesned matter which a and b is. So a and b, 21 there, and then we'll say x is the ed there. So we're going to have 21 squared plus x squared equals the 75 squared. Okay, so 21 squared is 441. And 75 squared is 5,625. If we're going too fast, just pause the recording and move on. All right, now we got to subtract 441 to the right side. So 5,625 minus the 441 is 5,184. And now we take the square root to get rid of the square. Square root of your answer, and that's 72. All right, so 72 is the length of E to D. And again, we know this is 90 degrees. Now we just need C or D. I'm going to go ahead and use angle D here. And again, I want to use the numbers given in the problem. I can use 72 if I want, but I like to use the numbers given in the problem. So if I use those numbers from angle D, that would be the opposite leg and the hypotenuse. So opposite and hypotenuse in SOHCAHTOA is the sine function. So the sine of angle D is the opposite leg 21 over the hypotenuse 75. And again, to get angle D by itself, I have to take the arc sine of 21 over 75. Be careful on your calculator. Make sure you put a parentheses at the end of that. So let's do this together. If you need time, hit stop or pause and try to do this on your own. Second sine 21 divided by 75. Hit the end of your parentheses, and that gives me angle D to be 16.3 degrees. And again, since I have those two angles, I know what angle C is. I can take 180 minus the 90 minus the 16.3, and the angle C is then 73.7 degrees. Now I've solved both of those triangles. That's all you need to do. You get all the legs of your triangle and solve for all the angles. All right, let's go ahead and do number 9. This is 52 degrees at angle L. I don't have enough information to use the Pythagorean Theorem to get the legs. So what I want to do is either use cosine, which the cosine is the adjacent leg over the hypotenuse. Remember, the hypotenuse is opposite the 90-degree angle. Or I could use the sine key and do the opposite leg over the hypotenuse. It doesn't really matter. Since I have that marked like that, or since you probably have it marked as cosine, we'll go ahead and use cosine. So the cosine of 52 degrees is the adjacent leg, we'll call it x, and the opposite leg we'll call y. The adjacent leg, x, over the hypotenuse 3. And now you do what we've been doing all along. We got to get x by itself, multiply by 3 on both sides, and take 3 on your calculator times the cosine of 52. And so x is equal to 1.85. Now that should be rounded. It's really 0.84, so we'll say it's 1.8. 1.8 is going to be x. Now to find y, we're going to do the sine of angle L, or 52 degrees. That's equal to the opposite leg y. I'll draw it in blue. The opposite leg y over the hypotenuse. And again, multiply by 3 to get the y by itself. Take your calculator, 3 times the sine of 52, and that is equal to 2.4. All right, now we have our sides. We just need to get our angles. I'm going to go ahead and erase these lines so we can make it look a little nicer. Now, we already know that this is 90 degrees. We know that's 52, so subtract both of those from 180, and that'll give you angle N, which is 38 degrees. And now you've solved that triangle. All right? So remember, if it's going too fast, go ahead and pause and take your time to work on some things, or rewind it and relook at what we're doing. We're going to do number 10 again and then finish with number 11. So number 10, I'm going to do this angle first since we have these. Do it a little backwards from what we just got done doing. This is 29 degrees and that's 90. So subtract both of those from 180 to get the other angle. 180 minus 90 minus 29, and that's going to be 61 degrees for angle Y. All right, so I'm going to call this this side angle A and this H for the hypotenuse. So now we got to solve for A and H. I'm going to use the angle given at angle Z, that's 29 degrees. I could use 61 if I wanted to, but I'll use the one given. So what I want to do, I can find A first, and that's the adjacent leg, but I don't have the hypotenuse. So I can't find the adjacent leg if I don't have the hypotenuse, but I do have the opposite leg. And so the tangent function uses opposite over adjacent, so SOHCAHTOA. So tangent of 29 degrees is equal to 18 over a. And the problem here is a is in the denominator. We need to move it to the top by multiplying by it. So the a's cancel on the right side. And now we have a tangent of 29 equals 18. So take 18 on your calculator divided by the tangent of 29. And that's 32.5. Okay, and again, I could use the Pythagorean theorem at this point to find the hypotenuse, but I don't want to use that 32.5, that's rounded. So what I want to do, let me erase some of this stuff here, is I want to go ahead and use 29 degrees again, but I'm going to use the opposite leg over the hypotenuse, and that is the sine function. So the sine function of 29 degrees is equal to the opposite leg over the hypotenuse. Again, the h is in your denominator. We need to multiply by h to move it out of the denominator. And we have h sine of 29 equals 18. And you're going to divide by the sine of 29. So take your calculator and do 18 divided by the sine of 29. And that would be 37.1. And there you've solved number 10. All right, now number 11, a little story problem here. A boat is pulled in by a winch on a dock 12 feet above the deck. Then, when the winch is fully extended to 25 feet, what is the angle of elevation from the boat to the winch? All right, so angle of elevation, remember, is from the horizontal line up to your line. All right, so once that angle, we'll call that angle theta. A little circle with a line in the middle of it, theta. All right, so what have we been given at that angle? We've been given the opposite leg and the hypotenuse. In SOHCAHTOA, opposite and hypotenuse would be sine. So we're going to do the sine of angle theta is equal to the opposite leg over the hypotenuse. And again, to move sine across the equal sign so that we can have theta by itself, we have to do that funny thing called the arc sign. And don't forget to use your parentheses. So take your calculator and do the second key, the sine function, and hit 12 divided by 25. And so the angle is now 28.7 degrees. That would be the angle of elevation. And you solved that problem. And that is it. Make sure you have this done for tomorrow, and we'll work on the problems in class. Thank you.